Beneath the day-to-day of humanity's existence lies a roiling black psychic sea. A chaotic collection of all the memories, emotions, wants, desires, needs of all of humanity combined. And there are things that live within this psychic sea. Amongst them lies something living at the very bottom, its depths, within the abyss, wanting to hide away from the rest of humanity, its entire existence, or even itself. A horrid mass of misery so heavy that it sits at the bottom of this ephemeral sea. But while it sits far away from the rest of existence, it wants it to quiet. It wants humanity to sit still, and you're stuck here with it. Hi, hello, and welcome back to CAIN, a tabletop RPG where you play as a psychic exorcist, and the thing you're hunting down today is the Ogre, a horrific mass of muscle and misery. Our first sin video! Now when it comes to these focuses, we're gonna go a bit less on mechanics like we do with the license videos, namely because the hunt and the actual exorcist, or the player, plays a lot more to the mechanics than the admin. So this is more the themes, mechanics, what you might be looking out for, the traumas, domains, a lot of the goodies and flavor text behind everything, and general abilities. But yes, the Ogre, the horrific, terrible, cold, depressed, despair, it's awful, it's a bad time. Now with its name, it is big, usually, and muscular, and just monstrous. Not quite as like dainty or presentation focused as the idol, because it just doesn't care about its form, in fact it just hates itself. Actively taking the shape of something that the host finds disturbing or horrific. Not in the sense of being scared, but of ugly, of miserable, of just pitiful. A bloated, sick horse with all four of its legs broken as it wobbles around towards you. Just, not literally, but it could be. When it comes to the emotions and associations of this thing, it is despair, it is grief, it is loss, it is hopelessness, self-hate, loathing. Just a very, very bad place to be. The design itself literally taking this up as it's something immovable, it's heavy in its weight, within its palace it's always trapped, it's never free. This doesn't mean it's literally stuck to its palace, it can go outside of it, but whenever it's in its palace it's always cramped, it's a tight location, never made for it. Its own effects just make its situation worse. But as with any sin, it goes further beyond just the emotions of any of these things. It goes back to the three traumas, things that on the hunt you should actually be looking out for because they could provide mechanical benefit against the sin. Now when it comes to these three questions or three traumas, every category has these things, and they're left to the specifics. So when making a sin, all of these questions have to be answered. These answers to these questions not just providing a mechanical benefit if you're investigating on the hunt, literally saying these things in front of the sin hinder and harm it. It doesn't just have to be through blasting or slashing. If you investigate enough and actually know the origin of the sin, you can hurt it, you can kill it. But when it comes to the Ogre, its traumas are who or what pushed you into this hole? Who or what is keeping you from going over the edge, which man, that one sucks. And what are you most ashamed of? Some heavy questions, especially the edge one, but the answers to these questions also affect the shape the sin takes. Yes, there's the general stuff with the Ogre, but each of these things have a visual representation on the actual, well, manifestation. The sin itself a reflection of all of this. But then it gets into what all of these sins share. Well, not all of them, but all of the ogres share. That heavy set, that horrific form, the thing that the host deems as ugly, pitiful, awful. To the point that even if a possession occurs, it makes the host look like an even worse version of themselves in the host's eyes. So if you have a fear of how your body looks or things about it, it just amplifies those effects. But no matter what, there is always a cold to the ogre, as it quite literally sucks the energy out of the room and from people around it. To the point of everyone going a bit slower, not having anywhere near as much ambition, or all emotions becoming numbed, not just in the host, but everyone around them where the sin is. But even to the point of sunlight coming through windows being a bit further dimmed, or lights beginning to flicker or go out, or just not be anywhere near as bright as they should be. But everything just also gets a bit cold, literally bodily temperature, that coffee you had that was nice, warm, and comforting, all of a sudden is just chilling. It makes everything suck, not to mention wet. Cold, terrible, ill weather, fog, mist, and mud. Like when it comes to water, it's not, oh, it's a bit wet, heavy rains, though it can be those things. It's mud. It's dirty, it's horrible, it gets everywhere. Then you go into the biological side of it. The bile, the rot, the mold, decay. Architecture itself just begins to fall apart. Roads crack, potholes grow worse. People age faster, things begin to rot, hair falls out. Because it's not just tied to the sin or just to the host. The mere presence of the thing, not even in its palace or the center of its power, its mere presence has this effect. Obviously, the higher in category, the more severe these things and obvious they become. But even on the minor level, the energy leaving the room, people just slowing down or not caring, the ogre will drag everyone down with them. But that's just its passive effects. To the way it specifically acts, it is the most emotionally tied to the host. Some of these others, can take or leave it, or just be formed and go out of their own way, or be directly malicious to the host. While the ogre can be malicious to the host, it usually wants to try and help. but that also just takes the shape of harming. Where you're hurt by your coworkers, some kind of distant family member, well, pull yourself away, stop contacting people, let's go out into the countryside so you never have to see anyone again. Worried about your shape, your form? Nah, that's fine, just put on darker clothes, stay in the shadows, go out at night so you don't have to see anyone during the day. It's just a horrific, reinforced depressive spiral with some kind of psionic entity, which in some ways makes it easy to find an ogre sin, but also hard. One, because if you find the host, you find the sin. Difficult in the fact that the host is also hiding because of the ogre, most of the time. But on to its hiding spot, its palace. Now obviously, like some of the other effects it had, it's just awful. It's dark, damp, hard to find anything, it's filthy, it reeks. Could be any number of these in combination or isolation, but it's just terrible. It's decayed, it's abandoned, it's isolated, it's dark. While the decay is a common theme, the next one is the maze. It's maze-like, it traps you, it's hard to get out of, hard to move in. Just like the ogre itself and the emotional state it puts you in and how this trauma and this host got there, you do not want to move. You are going to stand still, you are going to be helpless. You are not going to have an answer. You're not going to have an immediate way out. You're not going to be able to instantly pin down the ogre. And the ogre itself is also trapped here. But whenever it's present within the palace, it can barely fit. The hallways are never made for it. The doors itself, this place is painful for it. The alarming part is this doesn't hinder its movement at all, but it never quite fits. It never quite stays. It's never comfortable. As this horrific mass is just squeezed within a hallway, it's consistently moving forward towards you, or pulling itself violently through its flesh and muscles being torn alongside different bits of decoration, walls, and door mounts, or the shadows seeping through every crack as the light begins to slowly go out one by one down the hallway, its entire form hidden within the darkness. Its palace sucks. And spreading from its palace, the center of its influence is the miasma, the effect an ogre has over an entire area leading to a sin event. This is the ticking clock your exorcists have to go up against. And this fog, before going even to any of its details, it's Silent Hill. Fog sweeping over the city, it reeks, has a tang to it. Everything within it decays further, there's things moving around it, shamblers. While these shamblers within the fog take a vague humanoid form, it's wrong. Just like the ogre itself, it's things that are not necessarily horrific in the scary way, just awful, just diseased, sick, bloated, misshapen, suffering as well. But this effect doesn't just leave room for the stumblers to come through, or a fog that seems to take out the light from everything. It could literally grow shadows, mold, beginning to creep everywhere, and then slowly infecting everything. Everyone within the fog itself falling under the influence of the ogre and just stopping. Just giving up. Not to mention the effects of the ogre here are stronger, as this is its domain spreading out, its whole influence taking physical manifestation in the world, and when standing within the fog, over you. But the miasma is its pressure, that thing that's consistently going on in the background, the sense of its influence over a town or a region. And next up, before we get on to its domains, its abilities, we have the severe attack. Every sin has one of these, and they can only be used once during a mission. And when it comes to the ogre, it's simple, brutal, and just as dangerous. Pulverize. It's nothing fancy, it's not a mind effect or anything, it's just going to crush you. It's just putting you in a hopeless, inevitable situation where you just get hurt. Gnashing teeth, terrible hands, it just falling on you, or just a building collapsing in on itself while you're in it. Dealing damage to the target and anyone who helps, no matter what the role is, on top of doing an injury and mangled limbs to the target, taking out an arm or a leg as it twists it in a horrific way, leaving you mangled for the rest of the mission. But if the attack is severe enough, you just lose limbs, alongside the mangling and being knocked out for the rest of that scene, the rest of that fight, just down and out immediately, permanently losing limbs. Both legs, an arm or two here or there, just gone. Not mangled, not broken, gone, as it puts you in a vulnerable position and crushes you. The weight of despair. Actually, there's one more bit before the domains. It's afflictions, the actual mechanical things that it can inflict on someone. The things that your exorcist or the humans underneath the effect of the miasma or just its mere presence begin to suffer under. First of these being white mold, that thing growing around the entire town or region under the miasma has infected you. The visual signs of its infection being stark white veins that you can see even through the skin. And this stops you from eating, drinking, you don't rest quite as well. The big kicker mechanically, you can't have any more consumables. You cough up everything else, and you can't benefit from anything. Your body itself is sapping your energy away from you. Next is frozen limbs, frostbite, the cold, this consistent chilling effect, harder to actually do anything or move, so you're consistently vying just for heat. The twitching panic of hands trying to grab something as the thumbs and fingers turn black. Third is circling the drain, where you can't benefit from any kind of setup or any kind of teamwork. Nothing else can help your situation, alongside the agenda of just giving up on something. Stuck with you mentally, the ogre's influence, nothing is going to turn out right. Next is black lungs, coughing up this horrific bile, your tongue itself growing bloated and black. Quite simple with this one. Can't talk. Well, you can, but it becomes very difficult as you're consistently coughing and hacking or spitting something else up. Next is rotting, which alongside the miasma, as the tension and the pressure increases, you slowly begin to take damage. As you're literally just rotting, not like the white mold of slowly infected, but just skin begins dying. Hair begins falling out, teeth as well. And the moment you would receive an injury from this, or you tick over into the next health bar, you die. This is instant death. There isn't a down and out or out of the combat. You die if you go down from rotting, as your body just stops. And lastly, the weight, which adds to your agenda, die. Just die. You get XP for it. It's not gonna matter afterwards, though. It's a list of nasty things, not directly tied to its domain, not directly tied to any of the specific traumas, but just the things an ogre can inflict on you or the people around it, or the backlash of the psychic presence. Now we are on to the domains. These are the fun abilities, not necessarily tied to direct mechanics, but just now things it can do. Things beyond the other just general afflictions or severe attacks or just mere presence or shape. When you're the admin and picking these, each sin has 8 specific domains. You get to pick 3. So a mix and match. So every time you bump into one, it might be a bit different, not to mention the traumas tied to it. But these are things that really add into that personality, or as a benefit might reflect what those traumas or the answer to those questions are. Not to mention they have sick names. So first off, so as you're roaming around during a scene, the ogre can just erase paths, doorways, windows, entrances, exits, roads, vehicles, anything that could design you to move forward, bring you to a place, progression. All of it is gone. Now, it doesn't have to literally be vanishing out of the way. It could just be everything locking or becoming blurred, or like in a video game where you can't quite see into a building or access it. But it could also just be blank face. That's just a brick wall now. The road itself has just vanished. All the lines gone. It's just a flat mat of concrete. All the cars that were on there previously, nowhere to be seen. Trapped while even in the open. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to leave. Within the miasma itself as well, just this endless fog on an empty road. That's the general thing it can do. Now, when it comes to a specific action it can do once per hunt, when an exorcist opens a door, the ogre can trigger this effect. The entire group is sent to a pitch black labyrinthine hostile location, a place they need to escape or else they will be harmed. And again, yeah, the idea of like backrooms as an obvious Joker reference, that's probably what the image is behind me. But you're an exorcist, you're investigating, or even just a normal human following under the circumstances. Moving around, and you open a yellow door that wasn't there. Then it's a hallway with doors upon doors that just go nowhere, consistently spiraling down and down and down and down, nowhere out, and things within the maze. Trapped. The miasma itself now brings darkness, as shadows grow longer or day just literally vanishes. Lights begin to flicker, grow dim, or just go out. And most alarmingly, alongside all of this, the ogre is invisible in darkness. Just entirely, it's just not there. And even has the ability to force lights to go out, with the exception to those that the exorcists are carrying themselves. So, when fighting an ogre, bring a flashlight. But what's so great about this one, let alone a massive, monstrous, heavy entity being able to be stealthy or just dipping in and out of shadows, it's the fact that when it activates the ability, the admin picks one of the exorcists and asks, "What do you see in the dark?" That question itself is a part of the ability. You are not alone in the dark. And I mean, really, if we're talking about trapped, decay, the idea of light just being gone. Trapped in the dark, the monster in your closet, this horrific, heavy form just stuck there, peeking through the doorway. And the fact that something so large, so monstrous, so obviously a big danger that you can notice is invisible. The ogre forces an exorcist to experience and feel a sense of some of its trauma, just the entire weight of its creation. This results in them becoming a bit more isolated, just like what the effects that the hosts are under, pushing people away, but mechanically, I'm gonna go into depth on this one a little bit because it's just so fun. Fun in the, terrible way. So the admin asks the exorcist, who in this group will let you down? And mechanically, every time that player fails a roll, you take damage, as they are letting you down. But again, that weight of despair being forced onto someone, believing everything's gonna fail, they need to just be isolated, get away from all this, and that everything is gonna go wrong. Now this one sucks to fight against, based around that horrific, bloated form, the terrible flesh and meat thing from the sluice. It now regenerates. On top of already being big, monstrous, hulking, it's now regenerating. and more resistant to damage being dealt to it, unless it's fire or acid, D&D troll rules, or other things that have a similar effect. But again, back to the thing just pulling itself through its palace, or dragging itself across the ground with one working limb, its fingernails long, bloodied, curled, as all the nails begin to dig and grow underneath each other, replacing them too fast. Its internal organs trying to heal past its missing legs as it's just dragged out, leaving a trail of meat behind it. Apologies if you were eating, by the way. Sins are already a strange manifestation of all these different traumas, but when it comes to the ogre, and especially this ability in this domain, it is purposefully terrible. Just awful. Just awful. Now this one accelerates the effect of the miasma, namely the rot, and less on the structures and more people. The inevitable place of meat. Living things begin to decay, age more rapidly. Now when it comes to mechanics, this is generally just superficial to the Exorcist as it wears off after the miasma, psychic shenanigans. But it's very awful. Hair falling out, pockets of flesh disappearing, being able to see to your cheek and teeth rotting, decaying, gums falling out. Just terrible walking corpses. And while the presence of the ogre does still accelerate this effect, like the miasma in general, its touch can immediately rot or decay things or break them. And that one includes you, as this ability can also apply rot from a distance, that affliction from earlier. That one is not superficial and doesn't go away as easily. Not to mention, alongside the rotting, anything healing or recovery-wise is lessened, as it's hard to heal when the wound itself is festering within seconds. Now this one allows the ogre to make a trace. Now a trace is an extension of the ogre through another form. So there's the core sin, and then there's another minor sin called a trace tied to that one core sin. Things like artificial sins and other minor things you can find out just in general within the Psychic Sea are just small instances. You kill that one, it's fine. A trace is directly tied or an extension of one of the larger sins. And this allows you to make one called a crusher. So you pick an exorcist, the admin asks them a few questions, and makes the sin out of their guilt and shame. This can be a more brutal offensive thing, just actively attacking, hurting you or the entire group, or it can be something a bit more manipulative, following you, hindering your progress both physically and mentally, forcing these afflictions on you early, acting as an extension of the ogre with a bit more malicious intent directly, hence the lash. This isn't just happening to hurt you, this one is purposely hurting you. Your own private coalescence of inner demons that have been formed against you. Now this one makes the environmental effects of the ogre worse. That whole mud, water, terrible fog, terrible smell, all of it can be pushed to lethal effect. Drowning within mud, quicksand rapidly forming and just sinking you into it. Flash floods, water from just rainstorms beginning to flood a building within seconds. Things that don't make sense for the amount of water where there should be. Not to mention, instead of just the classic fog or sickening smell and smog that the miasma usually brings under its pressure, this one can be extreme weather, a horrific blizzard, the fog itself being literal choking poisonous gas. Terrible rainstorm, hurricane-like winds and weather. On top of all of this, the ogre can now teleport through this mud and flood, consistently traveling where the worst of these effects are from these disasters. Not to mention, making it very difficult to operate in said miasma, as you're just now in extreme weather. Now this one is a fun trade-off. It applies unique affliction, the sunken affliction, to an exorcist, and then 3 times per mission the admin can ask them a question. Is your heart in this? Specifically in reference to an action they're taking. This is the giving up, this is the not caring. And if they answer yes, they get extra dice against it, so really good. However, they also take immediate damage. And a chunk of damage. However, if they answer no, they go with the disadvantage equivalent in this system, but they gain a psyche burst, meaning you gain back some of your own psychic potential and power from giving into this ogre's influence. You're an extension of it for a brief moment. If you play into that despair, if you play into that emotion, if you play into this creature, you grow in power. That's an incentive. And as an admin, really allows you to toy around with an exorcist. That wraps it up for the ogre. It's this monstrous, sad thing. It wants to be left alone even from exorcists, even from the hunt. It's not actively seeking to be malicious most of the time. It's just accidentally being so. It's just wallowing in its misery until the world around it collapses. A thing of mangled limbs stalking its way through a hallway, being torn by everything else around it as the building is actively collapsing as a part of its movement, as a part of its body. It's this decayed, broken place. less a thing and more people trapped under rubble that is actively seeking to add you to its pile. Or a seeming pool of faces left with under the reflection of an entire flooded basement, wanting to drag you down into the waters and pressure and crushing weight of the massive bodies held against this current inside a flooded school. A gargantuan, disease-ridden dog with its organs and limbs beginning to spill out across the ground from itself, regenerating fast enough through warped reflections of what it should have been previously, a leg made entirely of horrific rocks, bent bone, and rotting skin. The landscape itself being warped and reflecting the mass of meat it left behind to rot. Or a silent, insane asylum where the padded walls are meat. These are shapes an ogre can take, its miasma, its effects, its domains, whatever mix of the traumas tied into it. While it is sad, while it's despairing, while it wants to get away from everything else or just leave its current situation stuck within a hole, wallowing to itself, it drags everything else down around with it. Everything, everyone, every exorcist, all of you, all of the world, time and space are being eaten alive. Execute it. Thank you for watching the video, and man, and talking about things that are made out of trauma, it's a bit touchy on what to say and what not to put in the video. On top of that, when it comes to the sins, they can take a variety of forms and shapes, not just in abilities, but also just literal shape based around those questions. While there's the general themes, it's hard to talk about any of these in specific, like the agony could take a variety of forms. Namely, like, how is it influencing you, like, mentally? Is it directly just asking you this? Is it something that's echoing in the back of your head? Is it visual representations of everything going wrong in front of you? Or more like it's regeneration, the Lash calls you brother, what does the Crusher look like, the nature of the miasma, a number of things. Lots of customization within one sin alone. And a lot of the things they're associated with are more examples. They don't have to do all of these things at once. They could just be the cold and wet, ignoring the mud, or some of the rot, or you could go all in on the rot, disease, and decay. But once again, thank you for watching the video, a thank you to my patrons, and have a nice day.
Everyone wants to be mad.